Hello, my name is Derek Mathis, and today I'll be taking you through a case study on the Bank of America Tower at One Bryant Park in New York City, the first LEED Platinum certified skyscraper and a worldwide model for green architecture. A few points about One Bryant Park include it is also known as the Bank of America Tower, located at 6th Avenue between 42nd and 43rd Street opposite Bryant Park. It is the first commercial high-rise to have achieved LEED Platinum certification. It stands at 55 stories, 1,200 feet approximately, and is the fourth tallest building in New York City. It boasts 2.1 million square feet of commercial space, was completed in 2009, and has a number of high-profile tenants such as Bank of America, the Durst organization, who are both co-owners, Aiken Gump Strauss law firm, and a number of others. Several existing buildings were demolished to make way for the tower, including Hotel Diplomat and Henry Miller's Theater, which was rebuilt and reopened at its previous location. As you can see, the One Bryant Park project team reads like a who's who in the field of green design and construction. The Durst organization, which is a co-owner with Bank of America, has a great reputation for leading the field of green development with several other projects in the city. Architect Cook Fox did an excellent job on this project. General contractor Tishman, also with a great resume of green development and construction. This infographic shows how the building stacks up to the Empire State Building. As you can see, it is a little shorter than the Empire State Building, which stands at 1,454 feet to the tip. And we are a little taller, including our spire, than the Chrysler Building, which is about 1,046 feet. Not shown on here is One World Trade Center, which, interestingly enough, stands at 1,776 feet. Cook Fox believed that in order to find a sustainable solution to a design problem, you had to first consider the building's immediate environment. As such, they viewed the site itself as providing a number of opportunities, and density seemed to be a logical starting point. At 54 stories with 2.1 million square feet of space, the building makes very efficient use of a relatively small parcel of land. It also maximizes transportational efficiencies by being situated on the same block as two subway stations, which are linked under the tower. They provide access to 17 different subway lines. Being 2 blocks from Grand Central Station, the building naturally discourages individual car usage, and this has a ripple effect, reducing greenhouse emissions, congestion, etc. The structure itself is designed in such a way that the light will be reflected to the adjacent park, providing a brightening effect versus traditional square buildings which simply cast shadows. Cook Fox also renovated the historic Henry Miller Theater, which is situated on the site. Opened in 1918, the theater was a local landmark. Run down after a long struggle to survive, the Miller Theater closed in February of 2004. Many of the features of the original design have been preserved, and the Georgian-style facade on 43rd Street has also been restored. The ownership and finance structure. One Bryant Park LLC owns the LEED certified building. Corporations owned roughly 50% by an affiliate of Durst and 49.9% by Bank of America. Original financing for the building came in the form of $650 million in Liberty bonds, which is a joint venture between city and state for purposes of revitalizing Lower Manhattan, and approximately $350 million from institutional investors. The project was refinanced in 2009 with a $1.275 billion loan. Half the financing was provided by B of A itself, and the remaining half was provided by a consortium of banks, including Bank of New York Mellon, Wells Fargo, Westdeutsche Immobilien, and Helvetia Bank. This was the largest refi transaction to take place after the Great Recession began in 2007. The building's owners used the money from the consortium to pay consortium of 5 banks to pay back a $1 billion loan. The rest of the funds were used to repay investors and complete the tower. The project received a little under $1 million in incentives from the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Being an Empire State Development Corporation project, it does contribute approximately $30 million annually in PLOs, or payments in lieu of taxes. These are made to compensate a local government for some or all of the tax revenue that it loses because of the nature of the ownership or use of a particular piece of property. It usually is tied to how many jobs are created and the amount of investment. The refinancing took 9 months to structure and was done amid one of the worst financing environments ever. It certainly helped that co-owners, Bank of America and Durst, put up a significant amount of the equity. Bank of America put up 50% approximately, and the building was 98% leased. So obviously an attractive project. It helped the Durst organization sign on the debt, as they are a well-financed organization with an excellent reputation. As we mentioned, there were a number of incentives included in the project. New York City Industrial Development Agency approved 25-year subsidies that include up to $38.5 million in sales and real estate tax benefits and $3.5 million in energy benefits over 25 years. $650 million in Liberty bonds from the city and state were certainly helpful. The federal government created this $8 billion program in 2002 to help revitalize Lower Manhattan and New York's post-September 11th recovery. The tax-exempt low-interest bonds offer major savings to recipients who assume no risk. The building also received benefit from a number of tax deductions outlined in the Energy Policy Act of 2005. These deductions actually total more than $4 million in incentives for reaching various certification levels. Developers can receive 100% tax abatement for 6 years with additional abatement for up to 4 years, both in new construction and renovation. The graphic was interesting prior to getting into the sustainable features of One Bryant Park. It shows what goes into creation of a green building. For purposes of time, we will be primarily focused on water, energy, waste, and quality of life. The stated goals of this project were to achieve LEED Platinum certification, to be one of the world's most environmentally responsible high-rise office buildings, focusing on sustainable site, water efficiency, environmental quality, energy, and atmosphere. They wanted to reduce potable water consumption by 50%, recycle 75% of construction waste, and contribute zero stormwater to the city wastewater system. There are a number of unique cutting-edge sustainability features that were implemented in this building. We'll touch on air and water in subsequent slides. The building stands as a prime example of how our cities can move towards a decentralized energy grid. Right now, our national grid is a bit clunky and inefficient. For many power plants, they can lose as much as 66% of the energy produced right out of the stack in the form of heat. An additional 7 to 10% is lost in transmission. So collectively, 3/4 of the energy we produce can be lost before it even gets used. The tower proves to be perhaps the best example to date of tapping into on-site generation. A 4.6 megawatt natural gas-fired cogen plant, or cogeneration plant, provides 2/3 of the building's electrical demand and is expected to reach 77% efficiency. It means zero transmission. The usage of energy is also maximized to provide the least amount of stress on the surrounding grid. At night, while demand in the building is low, the power will be used to make ice in 44 storage tanks in the basement of the building. During the day, this ice is allowed to melt and used to cool the air in the building, which drastically lowers its energy consumption during peak hours. Touching on the recycled materials, in order to maximize or minimize the impact of new construction, it's vital to use materials that decrease the net life cycle cost of the project, including material that comes in and the waste that goes out. One Bryant Park managed to surpass its goal of recycling 75% of its construction waste to end up at 83%. Additionally, with materials such as concrete with blast furnace slag and 60% recycled steel, the building contains 35% recycled content, which is pretty impressive. Air. When it comes to air quality, this building pushes the envelope to deliver fresh air to the entire building, which has filtered 95% of particulates. Even more commendable is that the air that leaves the building will be notably cleaner than the air that goes in, which makes this structure a public air filter for Midtown. When the air does reach the building occupants, it comes through an underfloor air system, a pressurized air plenum beneath removable floor tiles that brings tempered air closer to the occupied space rather than it originating from the ceiling. And this infographic tells you a little bit more about how, for example, 100% outside fresh air can be delivered to any 4 floors at any time. This slide deals with water quality and conservation. Again, the infographic gives you a sense of how the water is collected and recycled throughout the building. New York City has an aging infrastructure system, and one of those kind of shaky systems is the combined sewer overflow system. CSO, as it's otherwise known, means that rainfall brings stormwater flowing into sewage pipes. Even a small amount of rain can cause the sewers to reach capacity and stress the treatment facilities. To relieve the congestion and a mixture of rain and raw sewage raw sewage overflows directly into the Hudson River. Any effort that minimizes the release of sewage is certainly helpful to the environment. On that note, One Bryant Park collects every drop of rainwater that falls on its site, nearly 48 inches per year. A series of collection tanks distributed throughout the floors can store over 329,000 gallons of water. That's used for irrigating plants, flushing toilets. But it does not end there. Gray water treatment on the site takes water from the building and treats it for use in the cooling towers. That returns back to the atmosphere in the form of vapor. Cook Fox helped to cut the building's water usage by half by employing low-flow lavatory sinks and waterless urinals. In order to embark on a project like this, you've got to have a sustainability plan. You must set an extensive set of guidelines. Those need to be created and distributed to each team member prior to project kickoff. These strategies and guidelines are designed to raise awareness of sustainability issues and in turn increase the likelihood of achieving the goals set forth. It's also important that you educate the construction teams. You've got to require sustainable construction education prior to project kickoff. All on-site workers are required to attend monthly sustainability meetings along with periodic on-site green training classes. It also would be recommended to offer incentives for teams successfully implementing these green practices. Owners should also designate a lead leader, somebody that is accountable for reaching the certification. It's important to train subs in the difference between lead specs for materials fabricated off-site and materials used on-site. As mentioned above, the requirements for these materials, for fabricated materials on-site, may be less stringent than those fabricated off-site. I think it's also important to pre-qualify your subs and vendors, make sure that each has lead experience, check references, require a detailed plan covering soil erosion, sediment control, capture and reuse stormwater for dust control. In a tight urban environment such as this, dust can cause major issues to surrounding buildings. Those are just a few of the sustainability issues. We'll mention a couple of others on their next. Here are a few more, and I won't go through every one, but it gives you a sense of the level of detail that goes into the planning for a sustainable project. Building green is not just about bike racks and fancy urinals. Owners must assemble a team with the experience needed to meet the stringent certification requirements. In the case of One Bryant Park, Tishman Construction Corporation, which is an AECOM company, served as construction manager and was brought in early in the project process, which is key. They oversaw and coordinated the work of both base building and tenant upfits. Tishman implemented numerous processes in effort to assist the owner designer in achieving LEED Platinum rating. A few of those are mentioned and outlined herein, such as teaching subcontractors green building methods. This is critical to the success of the project. Subs need to have clarity regarding the building's green specs during the bid phase. Tishman also made sure subs were aware of the difference between LEED specs for the materials on-site and off-site, which we covered earlier. Selecting green materials, also very important. Tishman required early submission of green materials so they could be pre-approved by the architect and LEED expert. This strategy resulted in significant savings in time and money. Protecting indoor air quality is also a critical component. Tishman went to great lengths to maintain this quality. For example, they required subs to shield both ends of any ductwork to be installed so that when the ducts were delivered, they had not been exposed to water or airborne contaminants. As a means of preventing mold and mildew, Tishman required subs to keep materials out of wet areas and off the floor. They also coordinated the building design for the 4.6 megawatt cogen plant. They were a key member of the design process and provided advice during constructability reviews as to how to coordinate the design of the building around the cogen plant, what structural reinforcements may be implemented and needed, how to coordinate it, etc. Does it make financial sense? In researching the business case behind One Bryant Park, several factors seem to counterbalance the significant cost associated with building to such a high standard of sustainability. First, you have demand and risk mitigation. It's apparent that Durst had a proven track record of development, which is a high barrier entry market such as New York, and we're acutely aware of local demand drivers, vacancy rates, absorption, etc. So whether it's 25,000 square feet office building or a 2 million square foot office tower, the development process is essentially the same. The developer is going to identify who his tenants are going to be, and what the interest level is. He's also going to qualify whether or not these tenants are willing to pay the freight to go in such a building. It certainly helps that they had Bank of America as a tenant and co-owner, and they pre-leased 6 trading floors to them, which was 75% of the building. This is a significant reduction in risk. The fact that the building was 98% leased prior to the completion of construction tells me that Durst was successful in pre-selling their vision. Durst was likely incorporating tenant feedback into their development approach as well. Had one of the more larger tenants pushed back on lease rate, they probably wouldn't have gone to such great lengths and spent what they did on these green building systems. The bottom line is that developers are first and foremost driven by profit. If there was no demand for this particular product type, they wouldn't have built it. Then there's financing and incentives. In addition to having investment grade tenants pre-lease the majority of your building, it never hurts to have a huge bundle of incentives to kick off your project. We mentioned those incentives earlier, and certainly they played a factor in getting this project off the ground. Then there are savings in the form of operational efficiencies. I would suggest a long-term reduction in energy consumption likely played a major role in Durst's decision-making process. As an anchor tenant, they have taken a long-term hold position on One Bryant Park. Under this approach, they will reap the benefits associated with holding an asset well beyond the payback period of these expensive building systems. Just show a couple of examples about LEED certified buildings and how they cost on average 1 to 2% more than compared to conventional buildings. Yet it shows the annual energy savings, for example, in this slide, and the average payback period without government rebates. It's a little longer, as you can see, 4 to 5 years. So incentives certainly help. This also is just another graphic showing some of the average savings of green buildings, and you can see that they are significant. With projects like this and any other type of project of this nature, there are risks. And so how do you manage those risks, particularly the legal and financial? You know, when one considers the number of legal risks associated with such a large-scale green development in an urban environment, it's really surprising that this project wasn't plagued with more legal troubles. There were only 2 injury-related cases. With tenants occupying 2 million square feet of commercial space, upfits to complete, schedules to maintain, and a significant amount of cutting-edge green building systems to install, there was no shortage of landmines to avoid. The owners and their design team went through great lengths to mitigate this risk. Some of these potential risks include incentives, for example. Real estate developers and civic groups vocally opposed Durst and BOA's use of Liberty bonds. The bonds, they contended, were for rebuilding Lower Manhattan, not for new projects competing with downtown's already sizable block of vacant space. Had there been lawsuits associated with these incentives, it could have held up the project and potentially created it altogether. Operating costs also a risk. The biggest drain in the Bank of America tower is its trading floors. The servers supporting all those desks require enormous energy, as do the systems that heat, cool, and light the trading floors beyond normal business hours. These spaces take up nearly a third of Bank of America's 2.2 million square feet. Yet the building's developer and architect had no control over how much energy would be required to keep them operational. This issue represents significant financial risk, obviously, as well as legal risk depending on how the leases are structured. And that comes in the form of expense stops. The solution to that is rather difficult to mitigate because you simply can't predict your costs without knowing the energy required. Potential overruns can be addressed via the tenant leases relative to who handles the OPEX. In a full service lease situation, the landlord pays the tenant OPEX, and they can mitigate this through expense stops. There are also risks with the building systems. Projects with the size, location of 1 BP come with their own set of risks, legal, construction, financial, etc. But when you layer on the amount of green building systems that were used, you create a whole new set of potential issues. We touched on operating cost above, and this would include maintenance of building systems that can be considered, in some cases, unproven. So, for example, if you put in a 4.6 megawatt cogen plant that's very specialized and it breaks down, you have to call in a specialized contractor to come and fix it. Never without controversy. In a 2013 article by New Republic, they made claims that One Bryant Park uses more energy than the Empire State Building. Citing data released by the New York City in 2012, they said that the Bank of America headquarters produces more greenhouse gases and uses more energy per square foot than any similarly sized Manhattan office building. In fact, the building, which Al Gore once endorsed for its environmentally conscious design, uses more than twice the energy per square foot as the Empire State Building. It also performs worse than the Goldman Sachs headquarters at 200 West Street. That building actually has a lower LEED rating. The article goes on to point out that the problem wasn't that the tower is wasteful, but rather that the LEED certification system judges the building before it is occupied. In other words, buildings are evaluated on design rather than actual usage or performance. There was a response by some of the folks related to the design team stating that the building generates much of its electricity in its basement with a cogen power plant, recovers waste heat for various heating needs of the building, and employs innovative ice storage technology to shift grid power use to off-peak periods. They contend that the Bank of America tower removes stress from the existing electric infrastructure far more effectively than comparable buildings. It also eliminates distribution losses inherent in grid-generated power, avoids consumption during peak periods, and uses natural resources in a significantly more efficient way than many other buildings. A snapshot of the cost. Total project cost, $1.3 billion by most estimates. Size, as we've said, 2.1 million square feet. Cost per square foot, $619. And the green features and systems as a percentage of total project cost was 5% or $65 million. Rather significant cost. So what helps make a building like this successful? Improving environmental performance of the lease space by securing a few critical commitments on the part of both landlord and the tenant are important. Green leasing also helps align financial incentives so that both parties benefit from adopting green measures. Improvement environmental data reporting, transparency to enable tenants and landlords to measure success against agreed upon goals. Building took full advantage of green leasing in that it was able to secure tenants who not only placed a high priority on sustainability, but were willing to incorporate green practices into their own upfit. Durst was able to justify the additional costs associated with green building by using it as a marketing tool. There are a number of reasons to pursue green leasing strategies, many of which can serve to mitigate risk. Risks such as reduced utility consumption, improve relationship with tenants, which is a common goal, support corporate sustainability objectives. This is a big one. Many companies have set cumulative or percentage goals for carbon footprint reduction. Successful green leases greatly assist these objectives because they not only generate but enable tenants to measure and report quantitative sustainability improvements. Also, they improve employee productivity, recruitment, and retention. This is important when you're considering that companies compete for top talent and try to retain them. Many tenants are putting a high priority on quality of indoor air environment. Over the past several weeks, we've seen several cases in which green real estate has created value and financial benefits for tenants, landlords, and the environment. We've also seen how difficult it can be to quantify these benefits in the private real estate market. Investors are a savvy bunch, and while they may feel good about investing in green projects, they aren't going to do it unless they make money. In the 2014 study, Cushman & Wakefield said that investors and occupiers are becoming more attracted to sustainable projects. On the flip side of the coin, tenants are also demanding space in green buildings for a variety of reasons, such as reduction in operating expense, response to shareholder concerns, etc. Because tenants are gravitating toward green projects, landlords and investors alike now view green as a competitive advantage. There have been a number of lessons learned in the development and construction of One Bryant Park, such as being more aware of actual and baseline energy data. Effective commissioning is not simply marking off a green building credit checklist. You must identify and adapt to buildings' operational idiosyncrasies. Don't calculate energy efficiency by a static set of design model formulas. This is what we talked about earlier in the New Republic article. Measuring design versus actual performance. Setting energy efficiency and IAQ targets independent of the LEED rating system. Countering inherent design pressure to oversize systems. And to question overstated tenant requirements, energy requirements. That brings us to the wave of the future, net zero. Zero energy building is defined as a building with zero net energy consumption, meaning the total amount of energy used by the building on an annual basis is roughly equal to the amount of renewable energy created on the site. Z and E buildings, as they're often called, contribute less overall greenhouse gases to the atmosphere than similar non-Z and E buildings. Four well-documented definitions exist for net zero buildings. There's net zero site energy, net zero source energy, net zero energy cost, and net zero energy emissions. Net zero energy is a sought-after goal for many buildings around the world. These buildings rely on exceptional energy conservation and on-site renewable generation to meet all their heating, cooling, and electricity needs. Yet, many buildings that claim to be net zero are in fact are not. Actual net zero energy buildings are still rare, and it's hard to achieve that certification. There is an institute, Net Zero Energy Building Certification. It's the only program in the world that verifies net zero energy building performance. Achieving this certification with today's technologies and occupant expectations is difficult. There are a handful of projects out there proving that it is possible for the right building in the right setting, but sometimes going after the goal of net zero energy use in a building can have unwanted side effects. For example, a low-rise building on a low-density site will have a better chance of being net zero with on-site renewables, but that type of development is often looked at as urban sprawl. The investment in dollars and resources to get to net zero are significant and might be better spent on more cost-effective energy-saving options, such as more efficient building envelope or creating a district energy system that can serve an entire campus versus just one building. Some argue that while both have an important role to play, it's more useful and important to work toward net zero energy communities rather than net zero buildings. Individual high-performing buildings don't mean so much if the neighborhood as a whole is wasteful. While if an entire community is net zero, it's meaningful even if the individual buildings are not. Thank you for your time.